almost inside the doorway. He called to the nearest unarmed man, not loud enough to be heard by the Gurns. "Cliff, you and Sam Anders come here. Tell the rest to fade out of sight and get armed." Cliff Schroeder passed the command along, and he and Sam Anders approached. He looked back at the Gurns and saw they were within 100 feet of the, for them, unscalable wall of the stockade. They were coming without hesitation. A pale blue beam lashed down from one of the cruiser's turrets, and a 50-foot section of the wall erupted into dust with a sound like thunder. The wind swept the dust aside in a gigantic cloud, and the Gurns came through the gap, looking neither to the right nor left. "That, I suppose," Sam Anders said from beside him, "was lesson number 1 for degenerate savages like us. Gurns, like gods, are not to be hindered by man-made barriers." The Gurns walked with a peculiar gait that puzzled him, until he saw what it was. They were trying to come with the arrogant military stride affected by the Gurns, and in the 1.5 gravity they were succeeding in achieving only a heavy clumping. They advanced steadily, and as they drew closer he saw that in the right hand of each Gurn soldier was a blaster, while in the left hand of each could be seen the metallic glitter of chains. Schroeder smiled thinly. "It looks like they want to subject about a dozen of us to some painful questioning." No one else was any longer in sight, and the Gurns came straight toward the three on the steps. They stopped 40 feet away at a word of command from the officer, and Gurns and Ragnarok men exchanged silent stares. The faces of the Ragnarok men bearded and expressionless, the faces of the Gurns hairless and reflecting a contemptuous curiosity. "Narth," the communicator on the Gurn officer's belt spoke with metallic authority. "What do they look like? Did we come 200 light-years to view some animated vegetables?" "No, Commander," Narth answered. "I think the discard of the rejects 200 years ago has produced for us an unexpected reward. There are 3 natives under the canopy before me, and their physical perfection and complete adaptation to this hellish gravity is astonishing. They could be used to replace expensive machines on some of the outer world mines," the commander said, "providing their intelligence isn't too abysmally low. What about that?" "They can surely be taught to perform simple manual labor," Narth answered. "Get on with your job," the commander said. "Try to pick some of the most intelligent-looking ones for questioning. I can't believe these cattle sent that message, and they're going to tell us who did. And pick some young, strong ones for the medical staff to examine. Ones that won't curl up and die after the first few cuts of the knife." "We'll chain these 3 first," Narth said. He lifted his hand in an imperious gesture to Humboldt and the other 2 and ordered in accented Terran, "Come here." No one moved, and he said again sharply, "Come here." Again no one moved, and the minor officer beside Narth said, "Apparently they can't even understand Terran now." "Then we'll give them some action they can understand," Narth snapped, his face flushing with irritation. "We'll drag them out by their heels." The Gurns advanced purposefully, 3 of them holstering their blasters to make their chains ready. When they had passed under the canopy and could not be seen from the ship, Humboldt spoke. "All right, Jimmy." The Gurns froze in mid-stride, suspicion flashing across their faces. "Look up on the roof," he said in Gurn. They looked, and the suspicion became gaping dismay. "You can be our prisoners, or you can be corpses," he said. "We don't care which." The urgent hiss of Narth's command broke their indecision. "Kill them!" 6 of them tried to obey, bringing up their blasters in movements that seemed curiously heavy and slow, as though the gravity of Ragnarok had turned their arms to wood. 3 of them almost lifted their blasters high enough to fire at the steps in front of them before arrows went through their throats. The other 3 did not get that far. Narth and the remaining 6 went rigid, motionless, and said to them, "Drop your blasters, quick!" Their blasters thumped to the ground, and Jimmy Stevens and his bowman slid off the roof. Within a minute, the Gurns were bound with their own chains, but for the officer, and the blasters were in the hands of the Ragnarok men. Jimmy looked down the row of Gurns and shook his head. "So, these are Gurns?" he said. "It was like trapping a band of woods goats." "Young ones," Schroeder amended, "and almost as dangerous." Narth's face flushed at the words, and his eyes went to the ship. The sight of it seemed to restore his courage, and his lips drew back in a snarl. "You fools! You stupid, megalomaniac dung-heaps! Do you think you can kill Gurns and live to boast about it?" "Keep quiet," Humboldt ordered, studying him with curiosity. Narth, like all the Gurns, was different from what they had expected. It was true the Gurns had strode into their town with an attempt at arrogance, but they were harmless in appearance, soft of face and belly, and the snarling of the red-faced Narth was like the bluster of a cornered scavenger rodent.
"I promise you this," Narth was saying viciously. "If you don't release us and return our weapons this instant, I'll personally oversee the extermination of you and every savage in this village, with the most painful death science can contrive, and I'll—" Humboldt reached out his hand and flicked Narth under the chin. Narth's teeth cracked loudly together, and his face twisted with the pain of a bitten tongue. "Tie him up, Jess," he said to a man near him. "If he opens his mouth again, shove your foot in it." He spoke to Schroeder. "We'll keep 3 of the blasters and send 2 to each of the other front groups. Have that done." Dusk was deepening into darkness, and he called Chiara again. "They'll turn on their searchlights any minute and make the town as light as day," he said. "If you can keep them blacked out until some of us have reached the ship, I think we'll have won." "They'll be kept blacked out," Chiara said, "with some flint-headed arrows left over for the Gurns." He called Lake and Craig to be told they were ready and waiting. "But we're having hell keeping the unicorns quiet," Craig said. "They want to get to killing something." He pressed the switch of the communicator, but it was dead. They had, of course, transferred to some other wavelength, so he could not hear the commands. It was something he had already anticipated. Fenrir and Segan were still obediently inside the doorway, almost frantic with desire to rejoin him. He spoke to them, and they bounded out, snarling at the 3 Gurns in passing and causing them to blanch to a dead white color. He set Tip on Segan's shoulders and said, "Segan, there's a job for you and Tip to do. A dangerous job. Listen, both of you." The yellow eyes of Segan and the dark eyes of the little mocker looked into his as he spoke to them, and accompanied his words with the strongest, clearest mental images he could project. "Segan, take Tip to the not men thing. Leave him hidden in the grass to one side of the big hole in it. Tip, you wait there. When the not men come out, you listen, and tell what they say. Now, do you both understand?" Segan made a sound that meant she did, but Tip clutched at his wrist with little paws suddenly gone cold, and wailed, "No! Scared! Scared!" "You have to go, Tip," he said, gently disengaging his wrist. "And Segan will hide near to you and watch over you." He spoke to Segan. "When the horn calls, you run back with him." Again she made the sound signifying understanding, and he touched them both in what he hoped would not be the last farewell. "All right, Segan, go now." She vanished into the gloom of coming night, Tip hanging tightly to her. Fenrir stood with the fur lifted on his shoulders and a half snarl on his face as he watched her go and watched the place where the not men would appear. "Where's Freckles?" he asked Jimmy. "Here," someone said, and came forward with Tip's mate. He set Freckles on his shoulder, and the first searchlight came on, shining down from high up on the cruiser. It lighted up the area around them in harsh white brilliance.
its reflection revealing the black shadow that was Sagan just vanishing behind the ship. Two more searchlights came on to illuminate